what this author called the Oriental. Our first story, then, will be The Talking Bird, The Singing Tree, and the Golden Water. There was an emperor of Persia named Koroskak, who, when he first came to his crown, in order to obtain a knowledge of affairs, took great pleasure in night excursions, attended by a trusty minister. He often walked in disguise through the cities, and met with many adventures, one of the most remarkable of which happened to him upon his first ramble, which was not long after his accession to the throne of his father. After the ceremonies of his father's funeral rites and his own inauguration were over, the new sultan, as well from inclination as from duty, went out one evening, attended by his grand vizier, disguised like himself, to observe what was transacting in the city. As he was passing through a street in that part of town inhabited only by the meaner sort, he heard some people talking very loud, and going close to the house whence the noise proceeded, and looking through a crack in the door, perceived a light, and 3 sisters sitting on a sofa, conversing together after supper. Which, keep in mind, would probably have been considered extremely crass of him. By what the eldest said, he presently understood the subject of their conversation was wishes. For, she said, since we are talking about wishes, mine shall have to be the sultan's baker for my husband, for then I shall eat my fill of that bread, which by way of excellence is called the sultan's. Let us see if your tastes are as good as mine. For my part, said the second sister, I wish I was wife to the sultan's chief cook, for then I could eat some of the most excellent dishes. And as I am persuaded that the sultan's bread is common in the palace, I should not want any of that. Therefore you see that I have a better taste than you. The youngest sister, who was very beautiful, and had more charms and wit than the 2 elders, spoke in her turn. For my part, sisters, I shall not limit myself to my desires to such trifles, but take a higher flight. And since we are upon wishing, I wish to be the emperor's queen consort. I would make him father of a prince, whose hair should be gold on one side of his head and silver on the other. When he cried, the tears from his eyes would be pearls, and when he smiled, his vermilion lips should look like a rosebud, fresh blown. The 3 sisters' wishes, particularly that of the youngest, seemed so singular to the sultan that he resolved to gratify them in their desires. But without communicating his design to his grand vizier, he charged him only to take notice of the house and bring the 3 sisters before him the following day. The grand vizier, in executing the emperor's orders, would but just give the sisters time to dress themselves to appear before his majesty, without telling them the reason. He brought them to the palace and presented them to the emperor, who said to them, "Do you remember the wishes you expressed last night, when you were all in so pleasant a mood? Speak the truth, I must know what they were." At these unexpected words of the emperor, the 3 sisters were much confounded. They cast down their eyes and blushed, and the color which rose in the cheeks of the youngest quite captivated the emperor's heart. Modesty, and fear lest they might have offended by their conversation, kept them silent. The emperor, perceiving their confusion, said to encourage them, "Fear nothing. I did not send for you to distress you. And since I see that without my intending it that is the effect of the question I asked, as I know the wish of each, I will relieve you from your fears. You," added he, "who wish to be my wife, shall have your desire this day. And you," continued he, addressing himself to the 2 elder sisters, "shall also be married to my chief baker and cook." As soon as the sultan had declared his pleasure, the youngest sister, setting her elders an example, threw herself at the emperor's feet to express her gratitude. "Sir," said she, "my wish, since it is to come into your majesty's knowledge, was expressed only in the way of conversation and amusement. I am unworthy of the honor you do me, and supplicate your pardon for my presumption." The other 2 sisters would have excused themselves also, but the emperor, interrupting them, said, "No, no, it shall be as I have declared. The wishes of all shall be fulfilled." The nuptials were all celebrated that day, as the emperor had resolved, but in a different matter. The younger sisters were solemnized with all the rejoicings usual at the marriages of the emperors of Persia, and those of the other two sisters according to the quality and distinction of their husbands. The one is a sultan's chief baker, and the other is head cook. The two elder felt strongly the disproportion of their marriages to that of their younger sister. This consideration made them far from being content, though they were arrived at the utmost height of their late wishes and much beyond their hopes. They gave themselves up to an excess of jealousy, which not only disturbed their joy, but was the cause of great trouble and affliction to the queen consort, their youngest sister. They had not an opportunity to communicate their thoughts to each other on the preference the emperor had given her, but were altogether employed in preparing themselves for the celebration of their marriages. Some days afterward, when they had an opportunity of seeing each other at the public baths, the eldest said to the other, "Well, what say you to our sister's great fortune? Is not she a fine person to be a queen?" "I must own," said the other sister, "I cannot conceive what charms the emperor could discover to be so bewitched by her. Was it a reason sufficient for him not to cast his eyes on you, because she was somewhat younger? You were as worthy of his throne, and in justice he ought to have preferred you." "Sister," said the elder, "I should not have regretted it if his majesty had but pitched upon you, but that he should choose that little simpleton really grieves me. But I will revenge myself, and you, I think, are as much as concerned as I. Therefore, I propose that we should contrive measures and act in concert. Communicate to me what you think the likeliest way to mortify her, while I, on my side, will inform you what my desire of revenge shall suggest to me." After this wicked agreement, the two sisters saw each other frequently, and consulted how they might disturb and interrupt the happiness of the queen. They proposed a great many ways, but in deliberating about the manner of executing them, found so many difficulties that they durst not attempt them. In the meantime, with a detestable dissimulation, they often went together to make her visits, and every time showed her all the marks of affection they could devise, to persuade her how overjoyed they were to have a sister raised to so high a fortune. The queen, on her part, constantly received them with all the demonstrations of esteem they could expect from so near a relative. Some time after her marriage, the expected birth of an heir gave great joy to the queen and emperor, which was communicated to all the court and spread throughout the empire. Upon this news, the two sisters came to pay their compliments and proffered their services, desiring her, if not provided with nurses, to accept of them. The queen said to them most obligingly, "Sisters, I should desire nothing more, if it were in my power to make the choice. I am, however, obliged to you for your good will, but must submit to what the emperor shall order on this occasion. Let your husbands employ their friends to make interest, and get some courtier to ask this favor of his majesty. And if he speaks to me about it, be assured that I shall not only express the pleasure he does, but thank him for making the choice of you." Basically, they're asking if they can be her nurses during the pregnancy. Very high honor. The two husbands applied themselves to some courtiers, their patrons, and begged of them to use their interest to procure their wives the honor they aspired to. Those patrons exerted themselves so much in their behalf that the emperor promised them to consider of the matter, and was as good as his word, for in conversation with the queen, he told her that he thought her sisters were the most proper persons to be about her, but would not name them before he had asked her consent. The queen, sensible of the deference the emperor so obligingly paid her, said to him, "Sir, I was prepared to do as your majesty might be pleased to command, but since you have been so kind as to think of my sisters, I thank you for the regard you have shown them for my sake, and therefore I shall not dissemble that I have rather had them before strangers." The emperor therefore named the queen's two sisters to be her attendants, and from that time they went frequently to the palace, overjoyed at the opportunity they would have of executing the detestable wickedness they had meditated against the queen. Shortly afterward, a young prince, as bright as the day, was born to the queen, but neither his innocence nor beauty could move the cruel hearts of the merciless sisters. They wrapped him up carelessly in his cloths and put him into a basket, which they abandoned to the stream of a small canal that ran under the queen's apartment, and declared that she had given birth to a puppy. This dreadful intelligence was announced to the emperor, who became so angry at the circumstance that he was likely to have occasioned the queen's death, if his grand vizier had not represented to him that he could not without injustice make her answerable for the misfortune. In the meantime, the basket in which the little prince was exposed was carried by the stream beyond a wall which bounded the prospect of the queen's apartment, and from thence floated with the current down the gardens. By chance, the attendant of one of the emperor's gardens, one of the principal officers of the kingdom, was walking in the garden by the side of this canal, and perceiving a basket floating, called to a gardener who was not far off to bring it to shore that he might see what it contained. The gardener, with a rake which he had in his hand, drew the basket to the side of the canal, took it up, and gave it to him. The intendant of the gardens was extremely surprised to see in the basket, a child, which, though he knew it could have just been born, had very fine features. This officer had been married several years, but though he had always been desirous of having children, heaven had never blessed him with any. This accident interrupted his walk. He made the gardener follow him with the child, and when he came to his own house, which was situated by the entrance to the gardens of the palace, went into his wife's apartment. "Wife," said he, "as we have no children of our own, God has sent us one. I recommend him to you, provide him a nurse, and take as much care of him as if he were our own son, for from this moment I acknowledge him as such." The intendant's wife received the child with great joy, and took particular pleasure in the care of him. The intendant himself would not inquire too narrowly whence the infant came. He saw plainly it came not far off from the queen's apartment, but it was not his business to examine too closely into what had passed, nor to create disturbances in a place where peace was so necessary. The following year, another prince was born, on whom the unnatural sisters had no more compassion than on his brother, but exposed him likewise in a basket and set him adrift in the canal, pretending this time that the sultana had given birth to a cat. How did he keep getting away with this? It was happy also for this child that the intendant of the gardens was walking by the canal side, for he had it carried to his wife, and charged her to take as much care of it as the former, which was agreeable to her inclination as was to his own. The Emperor of Persia was more enraged this time against the queen than before, and she had felt the effects of his anger, if the Grand Vizier's remonstrances had not prevailed. The third year, the queen gave birth to a princess, which innocent babe underwent the same fate as her brothers, for the two sisters, being determined not to desist from their detestable schemes till they at last had seen the queen cast off and humbled, claimed that a log of wood had been born. A log of wood had been born, and exposed this infant also on the canal. But the princess, as well as her brothers, was preserved from death by the compassion and charity of the intendant of the gardens. The Sultan, Khosrus, I'm gonna get this, Khosrus Shah, could no longer contain himself when he was informed of the new misfortune. He pronounced a sentence of death upon this wretched queen, and ordered the Grand Vizier to see it executed. The Grand Vizier and the courtiers who were present cast themselves at the emperor's feet to beg of him to revoke the sentence. "Your Majesty, I hope, will give me leave," said the Grand Vizier, "to represent to you that the laws which condemn persons to death were made to punish crimes. The three extraordinary misfortunes of the queen are not crimes, for in what can she be said to have contributed towards them? Your Majesty may abstain from seeing her, but let her live. The affliction in which she will spend the rest of her life after the loss of your favor will be a punishment sufficiently distressing. The Emperor of Persia considered with himself, and reflecting that it was unjust to condemn the queen to death for what had happened, said, "Let her live then, I will spare her life, but it shall be on this condition, that she shall desire to die more than once every day. Let a wooden shed be built for her at the gate of the principal mosque, with iron bars to the windows, and let her be put into it, in the coarsest habit, and every Mussulman," old word for Muslim man, Mussulman, "that shall go into the mosque to prayers shall heap scorn upon her. If any one fail, I will have him exposed to the same punishment, and that I may be punctually obeyed, I charge you, Vizier, to appoint persons to see this done." The emperor pronounced the sentence in such a tone that the Grand Vizier did not further remonstrate, and it was executed, to the great satisfaction of the two envious sisters. A shed was built, and the queen, truly worthy of compassion, was put into it, and exposed ignominiously to the contempt of the people, which usage she bore with a patient resignation that excited the compassion of those who were discriminating and judged of things better than the vulgar. The two princes and the princess were, in the meantime, nursed and brought up by the intendant of the garden and his wife, with the tenderness of a true father and mother. And as they advanced in age, they all showed marks of superior dignity, which discovered itself every day by a certain air which could only belong to exalted birth. All of this increased the afflictions of the intendant and his wife, affections of the intendant and his wife, who called the eldest prince Bahman and the second Perviz, both of them names of the most ancient emperors of Persia, and the princess Parizade, which name also had been borne by several queens and princesses of the kingdom. As soon as the two princes were old enough, the intendant provided proper masters to teach them to read and write, and the princess, their sister, who was often with them, showing a great desire to learn, and the intendant, pleased with her quickness, employed the same master to teach her also, which at the time would have been very odd. I'm adding that. That's a parenthetical. For that culture, very odd to teach a woman to read and write. Her vivacity and piercing wit made her, in a little time, as great a proficient as her brothers. From that time, the brothers and sister had the same masters in geography, poetry, history, and even the secret sciences, and made so wonderful a progress that their tutors were amazed, and frankly owned that they could teach them nothing more. At the hours of recreation, the princess learned to sing and play upon all sorts of instruments, and when the princes were learning to ride, she would not permit them to have that advantage over her, but went through all the exercises with them, learning to ride also, to bend the bow, and dart the reed or javelin, and oftentimes, outdid them in the race and other contests of agility. The intendant of the gardens was so overjoyed to find his adopted children so accomplished in all the perfections of body and mind, and that they so well requited the expense he had been at in their education, that he resolved to be at a still greater. For, as he had until then been content simply with his lodge at the entrance of the garden, and kept no country house, he purchased a mansion at a short distance from the city, surrounded by a large tract of arable land, meadows, and woods. As the house was not sufficiently handsome nor convenient, he pulled it down, and spared no expense in building a more magnificent residence. He went every day to hasten by his presence the great number of workmen he employed, and as soon as there was an apartment ready to receive him, passed several days together there. With his presence And as soon as there was an apartment ready to receive him, passed several days together there, when his presence was not necessary at court. But by the same exertions, the interior was furnished in the richest manner, in consonance with the magnificence of the edifice. Afterwards he made gardens, according to a plan drawn by himself. He took in a large extent of ground, which he walled around, and stocked with fallow deer, that the princes and princess might divert themselves with hunting when they chose. When this country seat was finished and fit for habitation, the intendant of the gardens went and cast himself at the emperor's feet, and after representing how long he had served, and the infirmities of age which he found growing upon him, begged that he might be permitted to resign his charge into his majesty's disposal and retire. The emperor gave him leave, with the more pleasure because he was satisfied with his long services, both in his father's reign and his own, and when he granted it, asked what he should do to recompense him. "Sir," replied the intendant of the gardens, "I have received so many obligations from your majesty and the late emperor your father of happy memory, that I desire no more than the honor of dying in your favor." He took his leave of the emperor, and retired with the two princes and the princess to the country retreat he had built. His wife had been dead some years, and he himself had not lived 6 months with his charges before he was surprised by so sudden a death they had not time to give them the least account of the manner in which he had discovered them. The princes Bahman and Perviz, and the princess Parizade, who knew no other father than the intendant of the emperor's gardens, regretted and bewailed him as such, and paid all the honors in his funeral obsequies? I guess either way. And paid all the honors in his funeral obsequies. That sounds wrong. Which love and filial gratitude required of them. Satisfied with the plentiful fortune he had left them, they lived together in perfect union, free from the ambition of distinguishing themselves at court or aspiring to places of honor and dignity, which they might easily have obtained. Man, I'm rusty. One day, when the two princes were hunting, and the princess had remained at home, a religious old woman came to the gate, and desired leave to go in to say her prayers, it being then the hour. The servants asked the princess's permission, who ordered them to show her into the oratory, which the intendant of the emperor's gardens had taken care to fit up in his house, for want of a mosque in the neighborhood. She bade them then also, after the good woman had finished her prayers, to show her the house and gardens, and then bring her to the hall. The old woman went into the oratory, said her prayers, and when she came out, 2 of the princess's women invited her to see the residence, which civility she accepted, followed them from one apartment to another, and observed, like a person who understood what belonged to furniture, the nice arrangement of everything. They conducted her also into the garden, the disposition of which she found so well planned that she admired it, observing that the person who must have formed it must have been an excellent master of his art. Afterwards she was brought before the princess, who waited for her in the great hall, which in beauty and richness exceeded all that she had admired in the other apartments. As soon as the princess saw the devout woman, she said to her, "My good mother, come near and sit down by me. I am overjoyed at the happiness of having the opportunity of profiting from some moments by the example and conversation of such a person as you, who has taken the right way by dedicating yourself to the service of God. I wish everyone were as wise." The devout woman, instead of sitting on a sofa, would only sit upon the edge of one. The princess would not permit her to do so, but rising from her seat and taking her by the hand, obliged her to come and sit by her. The good woman, sensible of the civility, said, "Madam, I ought not to have so much respect shown me, but since you command and are mistress of your own house, I will obey you." When she had seated herself, before they enlisted into any conversation, one of the princess's women brought a low stand of mother of pearl and ebony, with a china dish full of cakes upon it, and many others set round it full of fruits in season, and wet and dry sweet meats. The princess took up one of the cakes, and presenting her with it, said, "Eat, good mother, and make choice of what you like best. You had need to eat after coming so far." "Madam," replied the good woman, "I am not used to eat such delicacies, but will not refuse what God has sent me by so liberal a hand as yours." While the devout woman was eating, the princess ate a little too, to bear her company, and asked her many questions upon the exercise of devotion which she practiced, and how she lived, all of which she answered with great modesty. Talking of various things, at last the princess asked her what she thought of the house, and how she liked it. "Madam," answered the devout woman, I must certainly have very bad taste to disapprove anything in it, since it is beautiful, regular, and magnificently furnished with exactness and judgment, and all its ornaments adjusted in the best manner. Its situation is an agreeable spot, and no garden can be more delightful, but yet, if you will give me leave to speak my mind freely, I will take the liberty to tell you that this house would be incomparable if it had 3 things which are wanting to complete it." "My good mother," replied the Princess Parizade, "what are those? I entreat you to tell me what they are. I will spare nothing to get them." "Madam, the first of these things is the talking bird, so singular a creature that it draws round it all the songsters of the neighborhood, which come to accompany its voice. The second is the singing tree, the leaves of which are so many mouths which form a harmonious concert of different voices and never cease. The third is the golden water, a single drop of which, being poured into a vessel properly prepared, it increases so as to fill it immediately, and rises up in the middle like a fountain, which continually plays, and yet the basin never overflows." "Ah, my good mother, how much am I obliged to you for the knowledge of these curiosities! I never before heard there were such rarities in the world, but as I am persuaded that you know, I expect that you should do me the favor to inform me where they are to be found." "Madam, I should be unworthy the hospitality you have shown me if I should refuse to satisfy your curiosity on that point. And I am glad to have the honor to tell you that these curiosities are all to be met in the same spot on the confines of this kingdom, towards India. The road lies before your house, and whoever you send needs follow it for 20 days, and on the 20th only let him ask the first person he meets where these things are, and he will be informed." After saying this, she rose from her seat, took her leave, and went her way. The Princess Parizade's thoughts were so taken up with these things that she never perceived the devout woman's departure, till she wanted to ask her some question for her better information, for she thought that what she had been told was not a sufficient reason for exposing herself by undertaking a long journey. However, she would not send after her visitor, but endeavored to remember all the directions, and when she thought she had recollected every word, took real pleasure in thinking of the satisfaction she could have if she could get these curiosities into her possession. But the difficulty she apprehended and the fear of not succeeding made her very uneasy. She was absorbed in these thoughts when her brothers returned from hunting, who, when they entered the great hall, instead of finding her lively and gay as she was wont to be, were amazed to see her so pensive and hanging down her head as if something troubled her. "Sister," said Prince Bahman, the oldest, "what has become of all your mirth and gaiety? Are you not well, or has some misfortune befallen you? Tell us, that we may know how to act and give you some relief. If anyone has affronted you, we will resent his insolence." The princess remained in the same posture some time without answering, but at last lifted up her eyes to look at her brothers, and then held them down again, telling them nothing disturbed her. "Sister," Bahman said again, "you conceal the truth from us. There must be something of consequence. It is impossible we could observe so sudden a change if nothing was the matter with you. You would not have us satisfied with the evasive answer you have given. Do not conceal anything, unless you would have us suspect that you renounce the strict union which has hitherto subsisted between us." The princess, who had not the smallest intention to offend her brothers, would not suffer them to entertain such a thought, but said, "When I told you nothing disturbed me, I meant nothing that was of importance to you, but to me it is of some consequence. And since you press me to tell you by our strict union and friendship, which are so dear to me, I will. You think, and I always believed so too, that this house was so complete that nothing was wanting. But this day I have learned that it lacks 3 rarities which would render it so perfect that no country seat in the world could be compared with it. These 3 things are the talking bird, the singing tree, and the golden water." After she had informed them wherein consisted the excellency of these rarities, she said, "A devout woman has made this discovery to me, told me the place where they are to be found, and the way thither. Perhaps you may imagine these things of little consequence, that without these additions our house will always be thought sufficiently elegant, and that we can do without them. You may think as you please, but I cannot help telling you that I am persuaded that they are absolutely necessary, and I shall not be easy without them. I'm guessing they're around 20 years old at this point, maybe a little younger. Therefore, whether you value them or not, I desire you to consider what person you may think proper for me to send in search of the curiosities I have mentioned. Sister, replied Bauman, nothing can concern you in which we have not an equal interest. It is enough that you desire these things to oblige us to take the same interest. But if you had not, we feel ourselves inclined of our own accord and for our own individual satisfaction. I am persuaded my brother is of the same opinion, and therefore we ought to undertake this conquest, for the importance and singularity of the undertaking deserve that name. I will take the charge upon myself, only tell me the place and the way to it, and I will defer my journey no longer than till tomorrow. Brother, said Prince Perviz, it is not proper that you, who are the head of our family, should be absent. I desire my sister should join with me to oblige you to abandon your design, and allow me to undertake it. I hope to acquit myself as well as you, and it will be a more regular proceeding. I am persuaded of your good will, brother, and that you would succeed as well as myself in this journey, but I have resolved and will undertake it. You shall stay at home with our sister, and I need not recommend her to you. The next morning, Bauman mounted his horse, and Perviz and the princess embraced and wished him a good journey. But in the midst of their adieus, the princess recollected what she had not thought of before. Brother, she said, I had quite forgotten the accidents which attend travelers. Who knows whether I shall ever see you again? Or alight, I beseech you, and give up this journey. I would rather be deprived of the sight and possession of these things than run the risk of never seeing you more. Sister, replied Bauman, smiling at her sudden fears, my resolution is fixed. The accidents you speak of befall only those who are unfortunate, but there are more who are not so. However, as events are uncertain, and I may fail in this undertaking, all I can do is to leave you this knife. And he pulled a knife from his vestband and presented it to the princess in the sheath, and said, Take this knife, sister, and give yourself the trouble sometimes to pull it out of the sheath. While you clean it as it is now, it will be a sign that I am alive. Sorry, I misread that. While you see it clean as it is now, it will be a sign that I am alive. But if you find it stained with blood, then you may believe me dead and indulge me with your prayers. The princess could obtain nothing more of Bauman. He bade adieu to her and Prince Perviz for the last time and rode away. We'll stop there for just a second. Wanting to warm up my tea a second. Give me one moment. As the prince gets out on the road, I feel like that's a natural kind of pausing point. All right, I'm back. So for anyone who might have been having trouble following, because there's a lot of talking, basically, two princes and a princess, they don't know that they're that, but that's what they are. A mysterious woman has come and told them about 3 curious artifacts, and they are and the oldest is going out to retrieve them so that their house might be perfect. And at this point, I have no idea whether or not their mom comes back into the picture. That's the curious thing for me. Forgot to breathe again. And he rode away. When he got to the road, he never turned to the right hand nor to the left, but went directly towards India. The 20th day, he perceived on the roadside a hideous old man who sat under a tree near a thatched house, which was his retreat from the weather. His eyebrows were as white as snow, and was also the hair of his head. His whiskers covered his mouth, and his beard and hair reached down to his feet. The nails of his hands and feet were grown to an extensive length, while a flat, broad umbrella covered his head. He had no clothes, but only a mat thrown round his body. This old man was a dervish for so many years, which retired, good God, from the world to give himself up entirely to the service of God, that at last he had become what we have described. Prince Bahman, who had been all that morning very attentive to see if he could meet with anyone who could give him information of the place he was in search in, stopped when he came near the dervish, alighted in conformity to the directions which the devout woman had given to the Princess Parizade, and leading his horse by the bridle, advanced towards him, and saluting him said, "God prolong your days, good father, and grant you the accomplishment of your desires." The dervish returned the salutation, but so unintelligibly that he could not understand one word he said, and Prince Bahman, perceiving that this difficulty proceeded from the dervish's whiskers hanging over his mouth, and unwilling to go any further without the instruction, pulled out a pair of scissors he had about him, and having tied his horse to the branch of a tree, said, "Good dervish, I want to have some talk with you, but your whiskers prevent my understanding of what you say. If you will consent, I will cut off some part of them and of your eyebrows, which disfigure you so much that you look more like a bear than a man." The dervish did not oppose the offer, and when the prince had cut off as much hair as he thought fit, he perceived that the dervish had a good complexion, and that he was not as old as he seemed. "Good dervish, if I had a glass, I would show you how young you look. You are now a man, but before nobody could tell what you were." The kind behavior of Prince Bahman made the dervish smile and return his compliment. "Sir," said he, "whoever you are, I am obliged by the good office you have performed, and am ready to show my gratitude by doing anything in my power for you. You must have alighted here upon some account or other. Tell me what it is, and I will endeavor to serve you." "Good dervish, I am in search of the talking bird, the singing tree, and the golden water. I know these three rarities are not far from here, but cannot tell exactly the place where they are to be found. If you know, I conjure you to show me the way, that I may not lose my labor after so long a journey." The prince, while he spoke, observed that the dervish changed countenance, held down his eyes, looked very serious, and remained silent, which obliged him to say to him again, "Good father, tell me whether you know what I am asking you, that I may not lose my time, but inform myself somewhere else." At last, the dervish broke the silence. "Sir, I know the way you ask of me, but the regard which I conceived for you the first moment I saw you, and which has grown stronger by the service you have done me, kept me in suspense as to whether I should give you the satisfaction you desire." That voice is going to kill me. "What motive can hinder you? And what difficulties do you find in so doing?" "I will tell you. The danger to which you are going to expose yourself is greater than you may suppose. A number of gentlemen of as much bravery as you can possibly possess have passed this way and asked me the same question. When I had used all my endeavors to persuade them to desist, they would not believe me. At last I yielded to their importunities. I was compelled to show them the way, and I can assure you they have all perished, for I have not seen one come back. Therefore, if you have any regard for your life, take my advice, go no farther, and return home." But Prince Bahman persisted in his resolution. "I will not suppose," said he to the dervish, "but that your advice is sincere. I am obliged to you for the friendship you express for me, but whatever may be the danger, nothing shall make me change my intention. Whoever attacks me, I am well armed, and can say I am as brave as anyone. But they who will attack you are not to be seen. How will you defend yourself against invisible persons? It is no matter. All you say shall not persuade me to do anything contrary to my duty. Since you know the way, I conjure you once more to inform me. The dervish found he could not prevail upon Prince Bahman, and that he was obstinately bent to pursue his journey. Notwithstanding his friendly remonstrance, he put his hand into a bag that lay by him and pulled out a bowl, which he presented to him. Since I cannot prevail you to attend to my advice, take this bowl, and when you are on horseback, throw it before you, and follow it to the foot of a mountain, where it will stop. As soon as the bowl stops, alight. Leave your horse with the bridle over his neck, and he will stand in the same place till you return. As you ascend, you will see on your right and left a great number of large black stones, and you will hear on all sides a confusion of voices, which will utter 1,000 abuses to discourage you, and prevent your reaching the summit of the mountain. Be not afraid, but above all things, do not turn your head to look behind you, for in that instant you will be changed into such a black stone as those you see, which are all youths who have failed in this enterprise. If you escape the danger, of which I give you but a faint idea, and get to the top of the mountain, you will see a cage, and in that cage is the bird you seek. Ask him for the directions to the singing tree and the golden water, and he will tell you. I have nothing more to say. This is what you have to do. And if you are not prudent, or rather, if you are prudent, you will take my advice and not expose your life. Consider once more, while you have time, that the difficulties are almost insufferable. I am obliged to you for your advice, replied the prince after he had received the bowl, but cannot follow it. However, I will endeavor to conform myself to that part of it which bids me not to look behind me, and I hope to come and thank you when I have obtained what I am seeking. After these words, to which the dervish made no other answer than that he should be overjoyed to see him again, the prince mounted his horse, took leave of the dervish with a respectful salute, and threw the bowl before him. The bowl rolled away with as much swiftness as when Prince Bahman first hurled it from his hand, which obliged him to put his horse to the same pace to avoid losing sight of it. And when it had reached the foot of the mountain, it stopped. The prince alighted from his horse, laid the bridle on his neck, and having first surveyed the mountain and seen the black stones, began to ascend, but had not gone 4 steps before he heard the voices mentioned by the dervish, though he could see nobody. Some said, Where is that fool going? Where is he going? What would he have? Don't let him pass. Or, stop him, catch him, kill him. And others with a voice like thunder, Thief! Assassin! Murderer! While some in a gibing tone cried, No, do not hurt him. Let the pretty fellow pass. The cage and bird are kept for him. Notwithstanding all these troublesome voices, Prince Bahman ascended with resolution for some time, but the voices redoubled with so loud a din, both behind and before, that at last he was seized with dread. His legs trembled under him. He staggered, and finding that his strength failed him, he forgot the dervish's advice, turned about to run down the hill, and was that instant changed into a black stone, a metamorphosis which had happened to many before him who had attempted the ascent. His horse, likewise, underwent the same change. Poor horsey. F in chat for horsey. From the time of Prince Bahman's departure, the Princess Parizade always wore the knife in sheath in her girdle, and pulled it out several times a day to know whether her brother was alive. She had the consolation to understand he was in perfect health, and to talk of him frequently with Prince Perviz. On the fatal day that he was transformed, as Prince Perviz and the princess were talking together in the evening, as usual the prince desired his sister to pull out the knife, and she complied, and seeing the blood run down the point was seized with so much horror that she threw it down. and she cried, "Ah, my dear brother, I have been the cause of your death and shall never see you more. Why did I tell you of these things? Or what importance was it to me? Or what importance was it to me to know whether the devout woman thought this house ugly or handsome or complete or not? I wish to heaven she had never addressed herself to me." Prince Perviz was as much afflicted at the death of his brother as the princess, but not to waste time in needless regret, as he knew that she still passionately desired possession of the marvelous treasures. He interrupted her, saying, "Sister, our regret for our brother is vain. Our lamentations cannot restore him to life. It is the will of God. We must submit and adore the decrees of the Almighty without searching into them. Why should you now doubt of the truth of what the holy woman told you? Do you think she spoke to you of these things that were not in being, and that she had invented them to deceive you, who had received her with so much goodness and civility? Let us rather believe that our brother's death is owing to some error on his part, or some accident which we cannot conceive. It ought not, therefore, to prevent us from pursuing our object. I offered to go this journey, and am now more resolved than ever. His example has no effect upon my resolution. Tomorrow I will depart." The princess did all she could to dissuade Prince Perviz, conjuring him not to expose her to the danger of losing two brothers, but he was obstinate, and all the remonstrances she could urge had no effect upon him. Before he went, that she might know what success he had, he left her a string of 100 pearls, telling her that if they would not run when she should count them upon the string, but remained fixed, that would be a certain sign that he had undergone the same fate as his brother. But at the same time told her he hoped it would never happen, but that he should have the delight of seeing her again. Prince Perviz, on the 20th day after his departure, met the same dervish. He went up directly, saluted, and asked him where to find the things. The dervish urged him with the same remonstrances, telling him that a young gentleman who had very much resembled him was with him a short time before, and overcome by his importunity, he had shown him the way, given him a guide, and told him how to act. But that he had not seen him since, and doubted not but he had shared the same fate as all other adventurers. "Good dervish, I know of whom you speak. He was my elder brother, and I am informed of the certainty of his death, but know not the cause." "I can tell you. He was turned into a black stone, as all I speak of have been. You must expect the same transformation unless you observe more exactly than he has done the advice I gave him. In case you persist in your resolution, which I once more entreat you to renounce." I don't know why he turned German. Don't ask me. "Dervish, I cannot sufficiently express how much I am obliged for the concern you take in my life, who am a stranger to you, and have done nothing to deserve your kindness. But I thoroughly considered the enterprise before I undertook it. Therefore, I beg of you to do me the same favor you have done my brother. Perhaps I may have better success." The dervish could not prevail with him to give up the obstinate resolution, and if his age did not prevent him, and he could stand, he would reach to get him a bowl. Without giving the dervish time to say more, the prince alighted from his horse, went to the dervish, who had taken the bowl out of his bag, in which he had a great many, gave it to him with the same directions. With the same directions he had given Prince Bahman, and after warning him not to be discouraged by the voices he should hear, however threatening they might be, but to continue his way up the hill till he saw the cage and bird, and let him depart. Perviz thanked the dervish, and when he had remounted and taken leave, threw the bowl before his horse and followed it. When the bowl came to the bottom of the hill, it stopped. The prince alighted, and stood some time to recollect the dervish's directions. He encouraged himself, and began to walk up the resolution to reach the summit. But before he had gone 6 steps, he heard a voice, which seemed to be near, as of a man behind him, saying in an insulting tone, "Stay, rash youth, that I may punish you for your presumption." Upon this affront, the prince, forgetting the dervish's advice, clapped his hand upon his sword, drew it, turned about to revenge himself, but had scarcely time to see that no body had followed him before he and his horse were changed into black stones. He did worse than his brother. In the meantime, the Princess Parizade, several times a day after her brother's departure, counted her chaplet. She did not omit it at night, but when she went to bed, she put it about her neck, and in the morning when she awoke, counted over the pearls again to see if they would slide. The day that Perviz was transformed into a stone, she was counting over the pearls when she used to do, when all at once they became immovably fixed, a certain token that he was dead. As she had determined what to do in case it should so happen, she lost no time in outward demonstrations of grief, which she concealed as much as possible. But having disguised herself in man's apparel, she mounted her horse the next morning, armed and equipped, having told her soldiers she would return in 2 or 3 days, and 2 or 3? And took the same road that her brothers have done. The princess, who had been used to ride on horseback and hunting, supported the fatigue of so long a journey better than most ladies could have done, and she made the same stages as her brother. She also met with the dervish on the 20th day. When she came near him, she alighted from her horse, leading him by the bridle, went and sat down by the dervish, and after she had saluted him, said, "Good dervish, give me leave to rest myself, and do me the favor to tell me if you had not heard that there are something in this neighborhood, a talking bird, a singing tree, and golden water." "Princess," answered the dervish, "for so I must call you, since by your voice I know you to be a woman disguised in man's apparel." Now he's Van Helsing. What am I doing? Whatever. Silly voices are silly. "I know the place where these things ought to be found, but what makes you ask me this question?" "Good dervish, I have had such a flattering relation of them given me that I have a great desire to possess them." "Madam, you have been told the truth. These curiosities are more singular than they have been represented. But you have not been made acquainted with the difficulties which must be surmounted in order to obtain them. If you had been fully informed of these, you would not have undertaken so dangerous an enterprise. Take my advice, return, and do not urge me to contribute towards your ruin." "Good father, I have traveled a great way, and should be sorry to return without executing my design. You talk of difficulties and danger of life, but you do not tell me what those difficulties are and wherein the danger consists. This is what I desire to know, that I may consider and judge whether I can trust my courage and strength to brave them." So the dervish repeated to the princess what he had told to Brahmin and Perviz, exaggerating the difficulties of climbing up to the top of the mountain, where she was to make herself mistress of the bird, which would inform her of the singing tree and golden water. He magnified the din of those terrible threatening voices, and the great number of black stones alone sufficient to strike terror. He entreated her to reflect that those stones were so many brave gentlemen, so metamorphosed, for having omitted to observe the principal condition of success, which was not to look behind them before they had got possession of the cage. When the dervish had done, the princess replied, "By what I comprehend from your discourse, the difficulties of succeeding in this affair are, first, getting up to the cage without being frightened, and secondly, not to look behind me. For this last, I shall hope I be mistress enough of myself to observe it. As to the first, I own that voices, such as you represent them to be, are capable of striking terror into the most undaunted. But as in all enterprises and dangers, everyone may use stratagem. I desire to know of you if I may use any in one of so great importance." "And what stratagem is it that you would employ?" asked the dervish. "To stop my ears with cotton, that the voices, however terrible, may make the less impression upon my imagination, and my mind remain free from that disturbance which may cause me to lose the use of my reason." "Princess, of all the persons who have addressed themselves to me for information, excuse me, I do not know that ever one made use of the contrivance you propose. All I know is that they all perished." "If you persist in your design, you may make the experiment. You will be fortunate if it succeeds, but I would advise you not to expose yourself to the danger." "My good father, I am sure my precaution will succeed, and am resolved to try the experiment. Nothing remains for me but to know which way I must go, and I conjure you not to deny me that information." The dervish exhorted her again to consider well what she was going to do, but finding her resolute, he took out a bowl, and presenting it to her, said, "Take this bowl, mount your horse again, and when you have thrown it before you, follow it through all its windings till it stops at the bottom of the mountain. There alight and ascend the hill. Go, you'll know the rest." After the princess had thanked the dervish and taken her leave of him, she mounted her horse, threw the bowl before her, and followed it before it stopped at the foot of the mountain. She then alighted, stopped her ears with cotton, and after she had well examined the path leading to the summit, began with a moderate pace and rocked up with intrepidity. She heard the voices and perceived the great service the cotton was to her. The higher she went, the louder and more numerous the voices seemed, but they were not capable of making any impression upon her. She heard a great many affronting speeches and raillery, very disagreeable to a woman, which she only laughed at. "I mind not," she said to herself, "all that can be said, were it worse. I only laugh at them and shall pursue my way." At last she climbed so high that she could perceive the cage and the bird, which endeavored, in company with the voices, to frighten her, crying in a thundering tone, notwithstanding the smallness of its size, "Retire, fool, and approach no nearer." Of course I give the parrot a bad voice, too. Why do I do this to myself? That was a snap decision. I didn't know I was going to voice a parrot today. The princess, encouraged by this sight, redoubled her speed, and by effort gained the summit of the mountain, where the ground was level, then running directly to the cage and clapping her hand upon it, cried, "Bird, I have you, and you shall not escape me." While Parizade was pulling the cotton out of her ears, the bird said to her, "I'm going to do a squawk before it speaks every single time. I hope you're prepared for this, chat. If you're not, that's on you, all right? This is on you. You've been warned." "What? Heroic princess!" Why do I do this to myself? "Be not angry with me for joining with those who exerted themselves to preserve my liberty. Though in a cage, I was content with my condition. But since I am destined to be a slave, I would rather be yours than any other person's, since you have obtained me so courageously. From this instant, I swear entire submission to all your commands. I know who you are. You do not." It's turning into Yoda. "But the time will come when I shall do you essential service, for which I hope you will think yourself obliged to me. As a proof of my sincerity, tell me what you desire, and I am ready to obey you. What? Also get me a cracker." At least I'm having fun. The princess's joy was the more inexpressible because the conquest she had made had cost her the lives of her two beloved brothers, and given her more trouble and danger than she could have imagined. "Bird," she said, "it was my intention to have told you that I wish for many things which are of importance, but I am overjoyed that you have shown your goodwill and prevented me. I have been told that there is not far off a golden water, the property of which is very wonderful. Before all things, I ask you to tell me where it is." The bird showed her the place, which was just by, and she went and filled a little silver flagon which she had brought with her. She returned at once and said, "Bird, this is not enough. I also want the singing tree. Tell me where it is." This is a bit I love. It's not even a full squawk. It's just a wah. "Turn about, and you will see behind you a wood where you can find the tree." There's a lot of shit on this mountain. The princess went into the wood, and by the harmonious concert she heard, soon knew the tree among many others, but it was very large and high. She came back again and said, "Bird, I have found the singing tree, but I can neither pull it up by the roots nor carry it." "What?" I'm going to get myself every time with that. It's almost a force of nature. I'm not even really doing it. "What? It is not necessary that you should take it up. It will be sufficient to break off a branch and carry it to plant in your garden. It will take root as soon as it is put into the earth, and in a little time will grow to be as fine a tree as that you have seen." When the princess had obtained possession of the 3 things for which she had conceived so great a desire, she said again, "Bird, what you have yet done for me is not sufficient. You have been the cause of the death of my 2 brothers, who must be among the black stones. I wish to take them home with me." The bird seemed reluctant to satisfy the princess in this point, and indeed made some difficulty to comply. "Bird," said the princess, "remember you told me that you were my slave? You are so, and your life is in my disposal." "What?" "That I cannot deny," answered the bird. "What? But although what you ask now is more difficult than all the rest, yet I will do it for you. Cast your eyes around, and look if you can. See a little picture. He'll be right at the plate. He's got a real good fastball." I don't know. This parrot just sounds so... Iago. I'm imagining Iago. That's what's happening here. "What? Cave of Wonders." "I see it already." "What? Take it then. And as you descend the mountain, sprinkle a little of the water that is in it upon every black stone." The princess took up the pitcher accordingly, carried with her the cage and bird, the flagon of golden water, and the branch of the singing tree, which is what that portrait is right there. It's a very nice portrait. I might make it bigger for you, but that is that's her doing that right there. Look at that. There you go. It's a little bigger for you so you can see it better. That's what that is. Isn't it neat? Good painting. And as she descended the mountain, threw a little of the water on every black stone, which was immediately changed into a man. And as she did not miss one stone, all the horses, both of her brothers and the other gentlemen, resumed their natural forms also. The horses are okay. She instantly recognized Bahman and Perviz, and as they did her, and ran to embrace her. She returned their embraces and expressed her amazement. "What did you do here, my dear brothers?" And they told her they had been asleep. "Yes," replied she, "and if it had not been for me, perhaps you might have slept till the day of judgment. Do you not remember that you came to fetch these things, and did you not see the plain covered with black stones? Look and see if there be any now. The gentlemen and their horses who surround us, and you yourselves, wear these black stones. And if you desire to know how this wonder was performed," she showed the pitcher, which she set down at the foot of the mountain, "it was done by the virtue of the water which was in this pitcher, which I have sprinkled every stone. After I had made the talking bird, this one here, my slave, by his directions I found out the singing tree and the golden water, but being still unwilling to return without taking you with me, I constrained the bird by the power I had over him to afford me the means. He told me where to find this pitcher, and the use I was to make of it." The princes Bahman and Perviz learned by this relation the obligation they had to their sister, as did all the other gentlemen, who expressed to her that far from envying her happiness in the conquest she had made, and which they had all aspired to, they thought they could not better express their gratitude for restoring them to life again than by declaring themselves her slaves, and that they were ready to obey her in whatever she should command. "Gentlemen," replied the princess, "if you had given any attention to my words, you might have observed that I had no other intention in what I have done than to recover my brothers. Therefore, if you have received any benefit, you owe me no obligation, and I have no further share in your compliment than your politeness towards me, for which I return you my thanks. In other respects, I regard each of you as quite as free as you were before your misfortunes, and I rejoice with you at the happiness which has accrued to you by my means. Let us, however, stay no longer in a place where we have nothing to detain us, but mount our horses and return to our homes." The princess took her horse, which stood in the place where she had left him. Before she mounted, Prince Bahman desired her to give him the cage to carry. "Brother, the bird is my slave, and I will carry him myself. If you will take the pains to carry the branch, there it is. Only hold the cage while I get on horseback." When she had mounted her horse and Prince Bahman had given her the cage, she turned about and said to Perviz, "I leave you the flagon of golden water to your care, if it will not be too much trouble for you to carry it." And Perviz accordingly took charge of it with pleasure. When all of the gentlemen had mounted their horses, the princess waited for some of them to lead the way. The 2 princes paid that compliment to the gentlemen, And they again to the princess, who, finding that none of them would accept the honor, but that it was reserved for her, addressed herself to them and said, "Gentlemen, I expect that some of you should leave the way." To which one who was nearest to her, in the name of the rest, replied, "Madam, were we ignorant of the respect due to your sex? Yet after what you have done for us, there is no deference we would not willingly pay you. Notwithstanding your modesty, we entreat you no longer to deprive us of the happiness of following you." "Gentlemen, I do not deserve the honor you do me, and accept it only because you desire it." At the same time, she led the way, and the two princes and the gentlemen followed. This illustrious company called upon the dervish as they passed to thank him for his reception and wholesome advice, which they had all found to be sincere. Though he was dead, however, whether of old age or because he was no longer necessary to show the way, did not appear. They continued on their route, but lessened in their numbers every day. The gentlemen who, as we said before, had come from different countries, after severally repeating their obligations to the princess and her brothers, took leave of them one after another as they approached the road by which they had come. As soon as the princess reached home, she placed the cage in the garden, and the bird no sooner began to warble than he was surrounded by nightingales, chaffinches, larks, linnets, goldfishes, and every species of bird of the country. The branch of the singing tree was no sooner set in the midst of the parterre, a little distance from the house, than it took root, and in short time became a large tree, the leaves of which gave as harmonious a concert as those of the parent from which it was gathered. A large basin of beautiful marble was placed in the garden, and when it was finished, the princess poured into it all the golden water from the flagon, which instantly increased and swelled so much that it soon reached up to the edge of the basin, and afterward formed in the middle a fountain 20 feet high, which fell again into the basin perpetually without running over. The report of these wonders was presently spread abroad, and as the gates of the house and those of the gardens were shut to nobody, a great number of people came to admire them. Some days after, when the Princes Bahman and Perviz had recovered from the fatigue of their journey, they resumed their former way of living, and as their usual diversion was hunting, they mounted their horses and went for the first time since their return, not to their own demesne? Not to their own demesnes, sure, but 2 or 3 leagues from their house. As they pursued their sport, the Emperor of Persia came in pursuit of game upon the same ground. When they perceived by the number of horsemen in different places that he would soon be up, they resolved to discontinue their chase, and retired to avoid encountering him. But in the very road they took, they chanced to meet him in so narrow a way that they could not retreat without being seen. In their surprise, they had only time to alight and prostrate themselves before the emperor, without lifting up their heads to look at him. The emperor, who saw they were as well mounted and dressed as if they had belonged to the court, had a curiosity to see their faces. He stopped and commanded them to rise. The princes rose up and stood before him with an easy and graceful air, accompanied with modest countenances. The emperor took some time to view them before he spoke, and after he had admired their good air and mien, asked them who they were and where they lived. "Sir," said Prince Bahman, "we are the sons of the late intendant of your majesty's gardens, and live in a house which he built a little before he died, till we should be fit to serve your majesty, and ask of you some employ when opportunity offered." "By what I perceive," replied the emperor, "you love hunting." "Sir, it is our common exercise, and what none of your majesty's subjects who intend to bear arms in your country ought, according to the ancient custom of the kingdom, to neglect." The emperor, so charmed with so prudent an answer, said, "Since it is so, I should be glad to see your expertness in the chase. Choose your own game." The princes mounted their horses again and followed the emperor, but had not gone far before they saw many wild beasts together. Bahman chose a lion, and Perviz a bear, and pursued them with such intrepidity that the emperor was surprised. They came up with their game nearly at the same time, and darted their javelins with so much skill and address that they pierced the one the lion and the other the bear so effectually that the emperor saw them fall one after the other. Immediately after, Bahman pursued another bear, and Perviz another lion, and killed them in a short time, and would have beaten out for fresh game, but the emperor would not let them, and sent to them to come to him. When they approached, he said, "If I had given you leave, you would have destroyed all my game. But it is not that which I would preserve, but your persons. For I am so well assured your bravery may one time or other be serviceable to me, that from this moment your lives will always be dear to me." Not to derail, but this part in particular is reading a bit like Hebrew literature. If you read, especially in the Old Testaments, the story of David, he would kill. He has a story about killing a lion. Samson has a story about killing a lion, and people looking on them quite favorably for it, even though, lions aren't that common. So kind of makes you think. But this reads very similarly. It's definitely of the same culture. The emperor, in short, conceived so great a kindness for the two princes that he immediately invited them to make him a visit, to which Prince Bahman replied, "Your Majesty does us an honor we do not deserve, and we beg you will excuse us." The emperor, who could not comprehend what reason the princes could have to refuse this token of favor, pressed them to tell him. And they answered, "Sir, we have a sister younger than ourselves, with whom we live in such perfect union that we undertake nothing before we consult her, nor she anything without asking our advice." "I commend your brotherly affection," answered the emperor, who, unbeknownst to everyone in this conversation, is their dad. "Consult your sister, meet me tomorrow, and give me an answer." The princes went home, but neglected to speak of their adventure in meeting the emperor and hunting with him, and also of the honor he had done them, yet did not the next morning fail to meet him at the place appointed. "Well, have you spoken to your sister, and has she consented to the pleasure I expect of seeing you?" The two princes looked at each other and blushed. "Sir, we beg your majesty to excuse us, but we both forgot." "Then remember today, and be sure to bring me an answer tomorrow." The princes were guilty of the same fault a second time, but the emperor was so good-natured as to forgive their negligence, but to prevent their forgetfulness the third time, he pulled out 3 golden balls from a purse and put them into Prince Bahman's bosom. "These balls will prevent your forgetting a third time what I wish you to do for my sake, since a noise they will make by falling on the floor when you undress will remind you, if you do not recollect it before." The event happened just as the emperor foresaw, and without these balls, the princes would not have thought of speaking to their sister of the affair. For as Prince Bahman unloosed his girdle to go to bed, the balls dropped onto the floor, upon which he ran into Perviz's chamber, and both went into Parazade's apartment. And after they had asked her pardon for coming at so unreasonable a time, they told her all the circumstances of their meeting the emperor. The princess was somewhat surprised at this intelligence. "Your meeting with the emperor," said she, "is happy and honorable, and may in the end be highly advantageous to you, but it places me in an awkward position. It was on my account. I know you refused the emperor, and I am infinitely obliged to you for doing so. I know by this that you would rather be guilty of incivility towards the emperor than violate the union we had sworn to each other. You judge right. For if you had once gone, you would insensibly have been engaged to devote yourselves to him. But do you think it an easy matter, absolutely, to refuse the emperor what he seems so earnestly to desire? Monarchs will be obeyed in their desires, and it may be dangerous to oppose them. Therefore, if to follow my inclination, I should dissuade you from obeying him, it may expose you to his resentment, and may render myself and you miserable. These are my sentiments. But before we conclude anything, let us consult the talking bird and hear what he says. He is penetrating, and has promised his assistance in all difficulties." The princess sent for the cage, and after she had related the circumstance to the bird in the presence of her brothers, asked him what they should do, and he answered, "The princes, your brothers, must conform to the emperor's pleasure." Oh, sorry.
Ah! The princes, your brothers, must conform to the emperor's pleasure, and in their turn, invite him to come and see your house.
"But, bird," replied the princess, "my brothers and I love one another, and our friendship is yet undisturbed. Will not this step be injurious to that friendship?"
Ah, not at all. It will tend rather to cement it.
"Then," answered the princess, "the emperor will see me." The bird told her that it was necessary he should, and that everything would go better afterward. Next morning, the princess met the emperor hunting, who asked them if they had remembered to speak to their sister. The princes met the emperor hunting. Prince Bahman approached and answered, "Sir, we are ready to obey you, for we have not only obtained our sister's consent with great ease, but she took it amiss that we should pay her that deference in a matter wherein our duty to your majesty was concerned. If we have offended, we hope you will pardon us." "Don't be uneasy. I highly approve of your conduct," the emperor replied, "and hope you will have the same deference and attachment to my person, if I have ever so little share in your friendship." The princes, confounded at the emperor's goodness, returned no other answer but a low obeisance. The emperor, contrary to his usual custom, did not hunt long that day. Presuming that the princes possessed wit equal to their courage and bravery, he longed with impatience to converse with them more at liberty. He made them ride on each side of him, an honor which was envied by the Grand Vizier, who was much mortified to see them preferred before him. When the emperor entered the castle, the eyes of the people who stood in the crowds of the street were fixed upon the two princes, Bahman and Perviz, and they were earnest to know who they might be. All, however, agreed in wishing that the emperor had been blessed with two such handsome princes, and said that his children would have been about the same age, if the queen had not been so unfortunate as to lose them. The first thing the emperor did when they arrived at his palace was to conduct the princes into the principal apartments, who praised without affection the beauty and symmetry of the rooms, and the richness of the furniture and ornaments. Afterwards, a magnificent repast was served up, and the emperor made them sit with him, which at first they refused, but finding it was his pleasure, obeyed him. The emperor, who had himself much learning, particularly in history, foresaw that the princes, out of modesty and respect, would not take the liberty of beginning any conversation. Therefore, to give them an opportunity, he furnished them with subjects all dinner time. But whatever subject he introduced, they showed so much wit, judgment, and discernment that he was struck with admiration. "Were but these were my own children," said he to himself, "and I had improved their talents by suitable education, they could have not been more accomplished or better informed." In short, he took such great pleasure in their conversation that after having sat longer than usual, he led them into his closet, where he pursued his conversation with them, and at last said, "I never supposed that there were amongst my subjects in the country youths so well brought up, so lively, so capable. And I was never better pleased than any conversation than with yours. But it is now time we should relax our minds with some diversion. And as nothing is more capable of enlivening the mind than music, you shall hear a vocal and instrumental concert which may not be disagreeable to you." The emperor had no sooner spoken than the musicians, who had orders to attend, entered, and answered fully the expectations the princes had been led to entertain of their abilities. After the concerts, an excellent farce was acted, and the entertainment was concluded by dancers of both sexes. The two princes, seeing night approach, prostrated themselves at the emperor's feet, and having first thanked him for the favors and honors he had heaped upon them, asked his permission to retire, which was granted by the emperor, who in dismissing them said, "I give you leave to go, but remember you will always be welcome, and the oftener you come, the greater pleasure you will do me." Before they went out of the emperor's presence, Prince Bahman said, "Sir, may we presume to request that your majesty will do us and our sister the honor to pass by our house, and refresh yourself after your fatigue, the first time you take the diversion of hunting in that neighborhood? It is not worthy of your presence, but monarchs sometimes have vouchsafed to take shelter in a cottage." My children, replied the emperor, your house cannot be otherwise than beautiful and worthy of its owners. I will call and see it with pleasure, which will be the greater for having my hosts, you and your sister, who is already dear to me from the account you give me of the rare qualities with which she is endowed. And this satisfaction I will defer no longer than tomorrow. Early in the morning I will be at the place where I shall never forget that I first saw you. Meet me, and you shall be my guides. When the princes Bahman and Perviz returned home, they gave the princess an account of the distinguished reception the emperor had given them, and told her that they had invited him to do them the honor as he passed by to call at their house, and that he had appointed the next day. If it be so, replied the princess, we must think of preparing a repast fit for his majesty. And for that purpose, I think it would be proper we should consult with the talking bird, who will tell us, perhaps, what meats the emperor likes best. The princess approved of the plan, and after they had retired, she consulted the bird alone. Bird, said she, the emperor will do us the honor tomorrow to come and see our house, and we are to entertain him. Tell us what we shall do to acquit ourselves to his satisfaction. It's kind of a jump scare at this point. Good mistress, replied the bird, you have excellent cooks. Let them do the best they can. But above all things, let them prepare a dish of cucumbers stuffed full of pearls, which must be set before the emperor in the first course before all the other dishes. Cucumbers stuffed full of pearls, cried Princess Parizade with amazement. Surely, bird, you do not know what you say. It is an unheard of dish. The emperor may admire it as a piece of magnificence, but he will sit down to eat, and not to admire pearls. Besides, all the pearls I possess are not enough for such a dish.
What?
I'm even doing a little head bobby thing.
What? Mistress, do what I say, and be not uneasy about what may happen. Nothing but good will follow. As for the pearls, go early tomorrow morning to the foot of the first tree on your right hand in the park. Dig under it, and you will find more than you want.
That night, the princess ordered a gardener to be ready to attend her, and the next morning early led him to the tree which the bird had told her of and bade him dig at its foot. When the gardener came to a certain depth, he found some resistance to the spade, and presently discovered a gold box about a foot square, which he showed the princess. This, said she, is what I brought you for. Take care not to injure it with the spade. When the gardener took up the box, he gave it into the princess's hands, who, as it was only fastened with neat little hasps, soon opened it, and found it to be full of pearls of a moderate size, but equal and fit for the use that was to be made of them. Very well satisfied with having found this treasure, after she had shut the box again, she put it under her arm and went back to the house, while the gardener threw the earth into the hole at the foot of the tree as it had been before. The princes, who, as they were dressing themselves in their own apartments, saw their sister in the garden earlier than usual, as soon as they could get out, went to meet her, and met her as she was returning with a gold box under her arm, which surprised them much. Sister, you carried nothing with you before with the gardener, and now you have found a golden box. Is this some treasure found by the gardener, and did he come and tell you of it? No, brother. I took the gardener to the place where this casket was concealed and showed him where to dig. But you will be more amazed when you see what it contains. The princess opened the box, and when the princes saw that it was full of pearls, which, though small, were of great value, they asked her how she came to the knowledge of this treasure. Brothers, come with me, and I will tell you. The princess, as they returned to the house, gave them an account of having consulted the bird, and as they agreed she should, and the answer he had given her, the objection she had raised to preparing a dish of cucumbers stuffed full of pearls, and how he had told her where to find this box. The sister and brothers formed many conjectures to penetrate into what the bird could mean, but after much conversation, they agreed to follow his advice exactly. As soon as the princess entered the house, she called for the head cook, and after she had given him directions about the entertainment, said to him, "Besides all this, you must dress an extraordinary dish for the emperor's own eating, with nobody else must have anything to do with besides yourself. This dish must be of cucumbers stuffed with these pearls." And at the same time she opened the box and showed him the jewels. The chief cook, who had never heard of such a dish, started back, and showed his thoughts by his looks, which The princess, penetrating, said, "I see you take me to be mad to order such a dish, which one may say with certainty was never made. I know this as well as you, but I am not mad, and give you these orders with the most perfect recollection. You must invent and do the best you can, and bring me back what pearls are left." The cook could make no reply, but took the box and retired, and afterward the princess gave directions to all the domestics to have everything in order, both in the house and the gardens, to receive the emperor. Next day, the two princes went to the place appointed, and as soon as the Emperor of Persia arrived, the chase began and lasted till the heat of the sun obliged him to leave off. While Prince Brahmin stayed to conduct the emperor to their house, Prince Perviz rode before to show the way, and when he came in sight of the house, spurred his horse to inform the princess that the emperor was arriving. But she had been told by some servants whom she had placed to give notice, and the prince found her waiting, ready to receive him. When the emperor had entered the courtyard and alighted at the portico, the princess came and threw herself at his feet, and the two princes informed him she was their sister, and besought him to accept her respects. The emperor stopped to raise her, and after he had gazed some time on her beauty, struck with fine person and dignified air, he said, "The brothers are worthy of the sister, and she worthy of them, since if I may judge of her understanding by her person, I am not amazed that the brothers would do nothing without their sister's consent. But," added he, "I hope to be better acquainted with you, my daughter, after I've seen the house." Again, he doesn't know that she is his daughter. This is just like a Middle Eastern thing. Call everyone brother, call everyone sister, mother, father, daughter, etc. "Sir," said the princess, "it is only a plain country residence, fit for such people as we are, who live retired from the great world. It is not to be compared with the magnificent palaces of emperors." "I cannot perfectly agree with you in opinion," said the emperor very obligingly, "for its first appearance makes me suspect you. However, I will not pass my judgment upon it until I have seen it all. Therefore, be pleased to conduct me through the apartments." The princess led the emperor through all the rooms except the hall, and, after he had considered them very attentively and admired their variety, said, "My daughter, do you call this a country house? The finest and largest cities would soon be deserted if all country houses were like yours. I'm no longer surprised that you despise the town. Now let me see the garden, which I doubt not is answerable to the house." The princess opened a door which led into the garden, and the first object which presented itself to the emperor's view was the golden fountain. Surprised at so rare an object, he asked from whence that wonderful water, which gave so much pleasure to behold, had been procured. Where was its source, and by what art was it made to play so high? He said he would presently take a nearer view of it. The princess then led him to the spot where the harmonious tree was planted, and there the emperor heard a concert, different from all he had ever heard before. And stopping to see where the musicians were, he could discern nobody far or near, but still distinctively heard the music which ravished his senses. "My daughter," he said, "where are the musicians whom I hear? Are they underground, or invisible in the air? Such excellent performers will hazard nothing by being seen. On the contrary, they would please the more." "Sir, they're not musicians, but the leaves of the tree the majesty sees before you, which form this concert. And if you will give yourself the trouble to go a little nearer, you'll be convinced, and the voices will be more distinct." The emperor went nearer and was so charmed with the sweet harmony that he would have never been tired with hearing it, but that his desire to have a nearer view of the golden fountain of water forced him away. "Daughter," said he, "tell me, I pray you, whether this wonderful tree was found in your garden by chance, or was a present made to you, or have you procured it from some foreign country? It must certainly have come from a great distance, otherwise, curious as I am after natural rarities, I should have heard of it. What name do you call it by?" "Sir, this tree has no name other than that of the singing tree, and is not a native of this country. It would at present take up too much time to tell your majesty by what adventures it came here. Its history is connected with the golden water and the talking bird, which came to me at the same time, and which your majesty may presently see. But if it be agreeable to you, after you've rested yourself and recovered the fatigue of hunting, which must be the greater because of the sun's intense heat, I'll do myself the honor of relating it to you." My daughter, my fatigue is so well recompensed by the wonderful things you have shown me that I do not feel it in the least. Let me see the golden water, for I am impatient to see and admire afterward the talking bird. When the emperor came to the golden water, his eyes were so steadfastly upon the fountain, that he could not take himself off them. At last, addressing himself to the princess, he said, "As you tell me, daughter, that this water has no spring or communication, I conclude that it is foreign, as well as the singing tree." "Sir, it is as your majesty conjectures, and to let you know that this water has no communication with any spring, I must inform you that the basin is one entire stone, so that the water cannot come in at the sides or underneath. But what your majesty will think most wonderful is that all this water proceeded from one small flagon, emptied into this basin, which increased to the quantity you see by a property peculiar to itself, and formed this fountain." "Well," said the emperor, going from the fountain, "this is enough for one time. I promise myself the pleasure to come and visit it often, but now let us go and see the talking bird." And as he went towards the hall, the emperor perceived a prodigious number of singing birds in the trees around, filling the air with their songs and warblings, and asked why there were so many there and none on the other trees in the garden. "The answer, sir, is because they all come from all parts to accompany the song of the talking bird, which your majesty may see in a cage in one of the windows of the hall we are approaching. And if you attend, you will perceive that his notes are sweeter than any of the other birds, even the nightingales." The emperor went into the hall, and as the bird continued singing, the princess raised her voice and said, "My slave, here is the emperor. Pay your compliments to him." The bird left off singing that instant, when all the other birds ceased also, and said,
What? The emperor is welcome. God prosper him and prolong his life.
As the entertainment was served on the sofa near the window where the bird was placed, the sultan replied as he was taking his seat, "Bird, I thank you, and am overjoyed to find in you the sultan and king of birds." Bird. It's just fun to say bird for right now for some reason. I don't know why. Bird, 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 bird. As soon as the emperor saw the dish of cucumbers set before him, thinking they were prepared in the best manner, he reached out his hand and took one, but when he cut it, was in extreme surprise to find it stuffed with pearls. "What novelty is this?" said he. "And with what design were these cucumbers stuffed thus with pearls, since pearls are not to be eaten?" He looked at his hosts to ask them the meaning, when the bird, interrupting him, said,
What? Can your majesty be in such great astonishment at cucumbers stuffed with pearls, which you see with your own eyes, and yet you easily believe that the queen, your wife, gave birth to a dog, a cat, and a piece of wood?"
The emperor turned. "I believe those things because the attendants assured me of the facts."
Those attendants, sir, were the queen's two sisters, who, envious of her happiness in being preferred by your majesty before them, to satisfy their envy and revenge, have abused your majesty's credulity. If you interrogate them, they will confess their crime. The two brothers and the sisters whom you see before you are your own children, whom they exposed and who were taken in by the intendant of your gardens."
This speech presently cleared up the emperor's understanding. "Bird," cried he, "I believe the truth which you discover to me. The inclination which drew me to them told me plainly they must be of my own blood. Come then, my sons. Come, my daughter. Let me embrace you and give you the first marks of a father's love and tenderness." The emperor then rose, and having had embraced the two princes and the princess, and mingled his tears with theirs, said, "It is not enough, my children. You must embrace each other. Not as the children of the intendant of my gardens, to whom I have been so much obliged for preserving your lives, but as my own children, of the royal blood of the monarchs of Persia, whose glory I am persuaded you will maintain." After the two princes and princess had embraced mutually with new satisfaction, the emperor sat down again with them, and finished his meal in haste, and when he had done said, "My children, you see in me your father. Tomorrow I will bring the queen your mother. Therefore prepare to receive her." The emperor afterward mounted his horse and returned with expedition to his capital. The first thing he did, as soon as he had alighted and entered his palace, was to command the Grand Vizier to seize the queen's 2 sisters. They were taken from their houses separately, convicted, and condemned to death, which sentence was put in execution within an hour. In the meantime, the Emperor Khosrow Shah, followed by all the lords of his court who were then present, went on foot to the door of the great mosque, and after he had taken the queen out of the strict confinement she had languished under for so many years, embracing her in the miserable condition to which she was then reduced, said to her with tears in her eyes, "I come to entreat your pardon for the injustice I have done you, and to make you the reparation I ought, which I have begun by punishing the unnatural wretches who put the abominable cheat upon me. And I hope you will look upon it as complete when I present to you 2 accomplished princes and a lovely princess, our children. Come and resume your former rank with all the honors which you are due." All this was done and said before great crowds of people who flocked from all parts at the first news of what was passing, and immediately spread the joyful intelligence through the city. Next morning, the emperor and queen, whose mournful, humiliating dress was changed for magnificent robes, went with all their court to the house built by the intendant of the gardens, where the emperor presented the Princes Bahman and Perviz and the Princess Parizade to their enraptured mother. "These, much injured wife," said he, "are the 2 princes your sons and the princess your daughter. Embrace them with the same tenderness I have done, since they are worthy of both me and you." The tears flowed plentifully down their cheeks at these tender embraces, especially the queen's, from the comfort and joy of having 2 such princes for her sons and such a princess for her daughter, on whose account she had so long endured the severest afflictions. The 2 princes and the princess had prepared a magnificent repast for the emperor and queen and their court. As soon as that was over, the emperor led the queen into the garden and showed her the harmonious tree and the beautiful effect of the golden fountain. She had seen the bird in his cage, and the emperor had spared no panegyric in his praise during the repast. When there was nothing to detain the emperor any longer, he took horse, and with the princes on his right hand and the queen consort and the princess at his left, preceded and followed by all the officers of his court according to their rank, returned to his capital. Crowds of people came out to meet them, and with acclamations of joy ushered them into the city, where all eyes were fixed not only upon the queen and her royal children, but also upon the bird, which the princess carried before her in his cage, admiring his sweet notes, which had drawn all the other birds about him, and followed him flying from tree to tree in the country, and from one housetop to another in the city. The Princes Bahman and Perviz and the Princess Parizade were at length brought to the palace with pomp, and nothing was to be seen or heard all that night but illuminations and rejoicings, both in the palace and in the utmost parts of the city, which lasted many days, and were continued throughout the empire of Persia, as intelligence of the joyful event reached the several provinces. And that is the story of the talking bird, the golden water, and the singing tree. Good story. All right. This is going to be kind of like pouch analysis, I guess. Now, off the top of my head, we see a couple of interesting themes. The first that my mind wants to address is the number 3. The number 3 occurs 3 times in this story. The queen and her sisters, the princes and the princess, and of course, the 3 great items. 3, this being, of course, written by Muslims in a Muslim country, which is an Abrahamic faith, consider the number 3 to be a number of completion or perfection. The Old Testament has this throughout, and while the New Testament triples down on it, you get the pun, the Old Testament does contain it, and since the Muslims do, for the most part, accept the Old Testament, with some changes and some variations, and their own folklores also feature the importance of the number 3, we have some idea of completeness. Now, in order from start to finish, at the beginning, we see 3 wishes. 2 of them are rather dull, 1 of them is great. Everyone gets what they want, but the only one worthy of what she wished for was the one who wished the most. Which is a very kind of strong Oriental idea. This used to be a very strong American idea as well. That if you aim low, you are a low person. And that if you aim high, you are naturally kind of a higher person. That idea has been stripped by modern culture. However, it does carry a lot of truth to it, doesn't it now? The people who don't have very high aspirations in life generally don't act like great people, generally speaking. There are some who are just so downtrodden by the circumstances of their life that they can't imagine something very high. And those are generally good people who have been severely oppressed. However, there are a lot of people who wish not to be great because greatness comes with work. It comes with responsibility and duty, a duty to be humble, for example. The older sisters, not humble. The youngest sister, rather, humble. Humble enough to take 20-ish years in captivity, being humiliated by the public. Very humble woman. And she did so, as far as the story says, without complaint. So there is a moral there as well. It's just kind of proving the first moral, which is, if you aim high, you are generally speaking a person of high regard. Or should be. There is some kind of symbolism to the princes and the princess, though I don't know what it is. I'm not exactly like, this story, by the way, is incredibly feminist for its time. It was collected somewhere about 1400 AD. For its time, this is incredibly feminist. The princess is the hero of the story, just full stop. She is pointed out in childhood to be the equal of her brothers, which at the time for that culture is the equivalent of saying today that she's better than her brothers, because no one's going to admit to a woman being better, kind of a thing. So being forced to admit that she's equal probably means she's better. And we do see her being better than her brothers. Though her brothers are great men, she is a great woman. And in this culture, a woman is to be humble, yes, but she also runs the home well. She is to be clever and wise, and to be a good confidant and advisor to the men. That is the point of a good woman in this culture. And I think, by the way, generally speaking, that is something true that is communicated, that women are, generally speaking, better housekeepers. And I don't mean like cleaning and such, because she didn't do any manual labor in this story. She directed manual labor, right? She is better at keeping a house in order, at delivering good advice, and being a good confidant. And then, of course, there is an overriding sense in this story of the religious. An overriding sense. The religious woman sets them on the quest for the 3 items. The dervish, which is a religious man who has put himself outside of society for the purpose of seeking God, the dervish directs them further and warns them against these artifacts. And then the artifacts themselves serve to entice the king into belief, and then the bird directly to trick him, almost, into a state where he can accept the truth, which if you just came up to him and told him the truth, he wouldn't have accepted it. But after disarming him and then tricking him with the cucumber and the pearls, he's willing to accept the truth. These artifacts being directed by a holy man and a holy woman, the man who dies as soon as his purpose is up, the woman who's never heard from again, we can assume these are some form of angel in this kind of context. They are directed to setting things to rights and delivering justice, which is just fantastic. I love that kind of a story arc. Bottom line, you can get a lot of interesting ideas and morals from this story. It is written in such a way that you could probably get a couple more out of here, and someone who knows the culture much better than I would be able to pull a few more out with more exactness. But as kind of a couch enjoyer of ancient cultures, that's what I get out of it. So that's my my finishing dialogue there. All right.